About 3.5 weeks ago, I had some little red-bellied woodpeckers, and here's a picture of the red-bellied woodpeckers. These aren't my red-bellied woodpeckers, but it's a picture of them. And they came to the dead branch on the pecan tree that stands right in front of my kitchen window. And I have had the privilege of watching this male and female pair begin to woodpeck little holes and watch that hole grow over a week and a half to about the size, about 2.5 inches in circumference. And after they got that hole about 2.5 inches in circumference, then I began to watch them peck into that tree with wood chips flying, with sawdust flying, and they made themselves what I call a woodpecker house. I mean, what else could it be? It took about a week and a half for them to make that little house. And after it was built, well, the female, she moved in. And I'm assuming that she has laid eggs, and I cannot imagine how tiny little red-bellied woodpecker eggs must be, because they're only about 4 inches tall from the top of their head to the tip of their tail. But anyway, she's there on her nest, and she leaves sometimes and comes back. But as the days have gone by, she's sitting on that nest longer and longer and longer. I have to tell you, being able to watch these woodpeckers make their house and the mom sitting on her nest, it's just been an moment for me. It's just been delightful. And I purposefully will walk by my kitchen window, because I really don't want to walk into my kitchen a whole lot, because it means you have to cook. So I walk by my kitchen window and I get to look at my birds, and I'm like, Well, this past Wednesday afternoon, I walked past my kitchen window to have my moment, and my turned to, oh no, the male and female were flitting around frantically. And what I saw was a juvenile European starling that had landed on the branch, and exactly where that bird had landed on the branch, his beak was peeking into the front door of the woodpecker's house. And I need to tell you something. That European starling was not there to sell the woodpeckers any Girl Scout cookies. No, that European starling was there to eat those eggs, and I sprung into action. I began banging on my kitchen window to scare that European starling away, to no avail. So then I run down my back stairs, run out, because underneath that pecan tree are a lot of rocks. And I thought, I'll just get me a rock and I'll throw it at that old bad bird. But when I got out there, the woodpeckers had done what woodpeckers are supposed to do, and they had scared the European starling away. But I stood at the base of that pecan tree looking up, and I was asking, what's going to happen next? Is that European starling going to come back and get the eggs? Is the mother going to abandon the nest because that starling had been there and maybe she's afraid to come back in? What is going to happen next? That really has been a significant story for me this week, and I've reflected on it. And in my emotion of and oh no, and what will happen next, I began to think about, in our lives, we have this movement and pattern in our lives. We have moments in our lives. And then all of a sudden we move to, oh no. And then we're standing there going, what will happen next? I did a wedding in Lubbock last week. It was a beautiful moment. The bride and groom were lovely. Then they went on to San Francisco to have another moment in San Francisco. And this week the bride stepped off an uneven curb in San Francisco, twisted her knee, tore her meniscus, and the moment moves to, oh no, what's going to happen next? Can I finish my honeymoon? Can I even walk? Am I going to have surgery when I get back home? And then again, as I reflected on this pattern this week, I could not help but think about those precious souls that boarded the airplane in Barcelona, filled with moments. I'm going on vacation. I'm going home. I'm going to a job interview. I'm going to work. and their moment of, oh no, what is going to happen next? And their families now asking the question, what is going to happen next? Palm Sunday is a fabulous awe moment. And as we enter into John's gospel today and we hear the story of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, you have to know that the people that were there that day, it was a high awe moment. They had heard of Jesus and they had been following him. And previously he had been in Bethany and had just raised Lazarus from the dead. His power was known widely. And these people who had gathered down this long road, and they were lining either side of the road, at the end of the road was the giant gate that gave entry into the city of Jerusalem. These people who had lined there were waiting for Jesus to enter in. And they were waving palm branches just like you did today. And it's significant to know that in John's gospel, he tells us that they were waving palm branches. In the other gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they just tell us that they were waving branches. But John identifies them as palm branches, and it's significant because the palm branches were a symbol of national unity. You see, those that were lining the road that day, waiting for Jesus to enter into Jerusalem, were waiting for the new king of Israel to enter in. It says in verse 13, they took their branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, shouting, Hosanna! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel. Those that were lining the road that day were waiting for Jesus to come in and to take his rightful place, the throne, to overthrow the Roman government, to overthrow any puppet kingdom that had been created by the descendants of King Herod. Jesus was to be the new king, and he was going to restore Israel to their rightful place and power. And the people were ecstatic. It was going to be the greatest awe moment yet. And then Jesus does something so interesting, so subtle, and yet so profound. In verse 14 it says, Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it. And Jesus rode that donkey in through the gates of Jerusalem. If I had been in the crowd that day, and if I had been waving my palm branch, a symbol of national unity, just like when we wave our little American flags at parades, and I was certain that Jesus was to be the new king of Israel, and I watched him go over to a donkey, to a beast of burden, to ride into Jerusalem on, my friends, I'm going to tell you something. My awe moment would have gone to, oh no, what's he doing? What's he doing? Because my king, I want him to ride in on a war horse. In fact, there were centurions there and their fine stallions were there. Why doesn't Jesus just go up and knock out one of those centurions and take his war horse and ride on in? Let's get this thing going. But that's not what he did. He rode in through the gates of Jerusalem on a donkey's colt. It's so very important that we experience the awe of Palm Sunday. But as Jesus goes through those gates of Jerusalem, my friends, it's also important that we continue to walk behind him in his footsteps. It's important that we walk all the way with him to the upper room and to experience his Last Supper with the disciples. It's important that we are there when he reveals to the disciples that someone will betray him. It's important that we move to the Garden of Gethsemane with him and we agonize along with him as he prays to God to take this cup from him. It's important that we are there when he's handed over to the chief priest and to Caiaphas. And when finally he goes before Pilate, and Pilate brings out a criminal, Barabbas, next to Jesus and tells the crowd, which man do you choose this day to be crucified? This criminal Barabbas or this man Jesus? And friends, the same ones that lined the road earlier in the week that shouted Hosanna, the ones that said, oh no, when he got on that donkey, that day in that courtyard shouted, crucify him, crucify him. And we have to continue to walk with Jesus as he drags his cross through the streets of Jerusalem all the way up the hill to Golgotha. And we have to be there as he breathes his last breath and surrenders his spirit. For you see, it is only in surrendering his spirit that Jesus becomes glorified as King. And that is the kind of power, and that is the kind of glory that is due our Jesus. And we have to stand there at the foot of the cross, along with the disciples and along with his mother Mary, and we have to look up and we have to ask God on Good Friday, what happens next? In a moment, our choir has an offering for us that will take us through this movement from awe to oh no to what will happen next. Let us begin our journey. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.